Good morning, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you very much to the Sabio team for inviting me to speak to you today. As I said, my name is Chris. I'm the Chief Executive of the Retail Trust. And I'm here to talk a little bit today around well-being and the health of your people and the importance of it in terms of a thriving culture, but more importantly, thriving economics within your organisations as well. I thought I'd just give a little bit of background about who we are, set some context as to why, hopefully, in some ways, I'm qualified to speak on this subject. So, the Retail Trust actually is the oldest industry-funded charity, benevolent society in the country. We were founded in a coffee shop only about a mile from here in January 1832. This is a cartoon of our founding president, Thomas Helps, rather aptly named Thomas Helps. Such was the standing of those initial trustees of our organisation, actually, that the Times sent a journalist down to come and cover that very first meeting. So the very next day, there's a full-page article in the Times that sort of sets out our mission statement and largely talks about doing three things. The first is very much to promote the idea that thriving economics come from happy, healthy people. So these were individuals cut from the same cloth as John Speed and Lewis, who set up the John Lewis Partnership around the same time, the cooperative initiative that was all set up around the same time, early sort of Benthamite thinkers. Second idea that they had was that in order to create social change, excuse me, they wanted to create what they called a confederacy of good feeling, idea that needed scale. They needed as many organisations and people as leaders involved in this movement as possible. And then lastly, their concept was that it was important to start putting the power back into individuals' lives. So this wasn't about setting up another set of workhouses at the time. They wanted an organisation that really gave individuals, colleagues, the opportunity to feel empowered about their own health. So if you fast forward almost 2 centuries, those three tenets really still sit very much at the heart of what we do. And we execute on that really in 4 main ways now. So we provide mental health and well-being solutions into organisations. So we look after the working population. Before people start on their life journey into retail and the surrounding industries that we support, we offer CPD accredited training for people. We support social mobility. At the other end of the age spectrum, we actually run around about 500 retirement properties, so we offer high quality social housing for people who've been in the industry and have fallen on hard times. And then lastly, we campaign on behalf of the sector, particularly around issues of health and well-being. Just a big call out to the Sabio team, who are a major charity partner of ours, and their funds go a long way into our ability to continue the work that's been going on for the last 193 years. So a big thank you. So why is what we do important to you? Well, particularly since October and the changes to the national insurance, the rising people costs for those organisations that are employing large numbers of people, we believe that the sort of hidden costs around poor mental health are one of the sort of large cost bases that organisations can go to try and create improvements in productivity and cost efficiency. So here are some of the statistics. Some of you may be familiar with them. The really interesting one for me, though, is the one in the middle here, presenteeism. So of the 3 things that essentially can be the outcome of poor mental health, whether it's absence or churn, presenteeism actually is the single largest cost to UK PLC. So that's the idea that people are turning up to your workplace every single day not really fit to work. You're seeing losses in productivity because actually people are already unwell. Now this in itself is an important figure, but right at the moment it's even more important to understand the implications of this, because traditionally when you go back through the data, in periods of uncertainty, in periods of economic uncertainty in particular, presenteeism tends to spike, because people are afraid to come forward and say that they are unwell for fear of them being made redundant or losing their job. So actually, you're seeing greater levels of low productivity in your workforce at the moment as a result of the uncertainty. There's no hope, actually, also that this is suddenly going to go away when things get better, because what we tend to see on the other side of periods of economic uncertainty is that those presenteeism figures then start to translate into high rises in absence and churn when things start to get better. It's something we call the Titanic effect, which relates to the concept that actually more people died as a result, once they got into safety, having fallen into the water in the Titanic disaster, than they did actually in the water. So your fight and flight sort of instincts kick in moments of stress and anxiety. But when people got out the water and were rescued, actually there was a higher mortality rate there. And so that we call this the Titanic effect. So after this current economic uncertainty sort of peters out, you're likely to see bigger spikes in churn and absence as a result of this presenteeism number right at the moment. So really important to try and get across that, although it's very hard to spot in organisations in the moment. Our solutions, our partnerships that we have with the industry, and actually ever since 1832, we've been a very broad church, so we look after organisations anywhere really involved in retail. Our definition of retail is that it's organisations that have any interaction with customers, so it very much includes call centre staff. Our data shows really that there's sort of 5 big themes going on within large workforces at the moment that are causing churn, absence and presenteeism. Cost of living crisis, it's not really a crisis at the moment, it's just how things are, but when you look at the economic data, it's still very, very difficult for people on low incomes to make their household budgets fit. And 44% of frontline workers, that's anyone really with a customer interaction, is still saying that they are stressed by their finances. Over a third of all of our interactions, so we've had 650,000 colleagues that we look after, around about 300,000 interact with us across any given 12 months. About a third of those are in some way related to money, whether that's people coming to us for debt relief advice, whether it's people coming to us to help with grants and non-repayable financial grants for immediate financial distress, or it's the anxiety and depression as a result of financial distress. A third of all interactions are still to do with money. So it's the number one issue still going on in large workforces. Second biggest topic, unfortunately, is a rise in customer abuse. So across every frontline colleague, population that we deal with, whether it's in store, whether it's in call centres, whether it's delivery drivers, we've seen a big spike in the number of people struggling with customer abuse, verbal and physical assault. About 90% of that entire population have in some way dealt with an abusive customer in the last year. For a third of people, it's now on a daily basis. So a third of your workforces are dealing with abuses and assaults, moments of verbal assault in particular, on a daily basis. And then the last 3 things, I think, really speak to cultural change that we've seen since COVID, where actually issues around home are starting to bleed into the problems of a workforce. So ever since 2020 and the pandemic, there has been a seismic shift in colleagues being more open about speaking around their mental health, which obviously from our point of view has been a good thing, but it has put increasing pressure on organisations who are now routinely expected to manage and help colleagues through issues at home. So whether it's work-life balance, actual health conditions that they're struggling with, or things that are going on in their home life, there is an increasing expectation from individuals that colleagues will, that in organisations will get positively involved in helping solve those outcomes. And you'll see later that in particular that is putting a high amount of pressure on junior line managers in particular. So those are the sort of issues that are driving problems for you and your colleagues. The data also shows that there are some really interesting trends in terms of timing and population and how that's manifesting across different populations within your organisations. This is a chart that sort of tracks morale, sense of well-being across the whole frontline colleague space from Q3 in 2023 until Q4 in 2024. We've actually about to publish what Q1 2025 looks like now, but it follows a very similar pattern. And probably not surprisingly, but perhaps very importantly, we do see quite a big drop in morale and well-being around the Christmas period. And so you can almost track people's sense of morale and how happy and healthy they feel at work from how much customer interaction they're having to have, both whether it's in store or through customer service centres. We also, interestingly, see quite a dip every year in the summer, which is slightly counterintuitive, but that is around women in particular struggle through this period as they're trying to balance out their children being off school and their work. Mothers are picking up still a lot more of the strain around that, but actually also people are on holiday at that point, and so more work falls onto the people that are left behind. So August and sort of late July are a difficult period within your organisations as well. Where we tend to see a spike in morale is actually now, so springtime, and this has quite big ramifications in terms of when to run training programs and when to run communication programs to your teams. A lot of organisations will spend time in the run-up and around Christmas sort of relaying messages of health and well-being, rolling out training at that time because that's the moment that people are stressed. But actually all the data shows people are far more closed off to receiving communications from their businesses at times of stress than they are when morale is high. So actually it's now. Now is the time to get messaging in front of your people, do training programs, and sort of really make sure they understand policy and communications around well-being, what help is available to them, and they're far more likely to absorb and take that in during times when their morale is good. The other bits that are sort of interesting, I think, is the distribution and service staff across all of the populations that we look after tend to be the unhappiest. And actually also it's younger people where we see the biggest problems. So 18 to 25, 26-year-olds are the most stressed population within organisations and tend to have the least amounts of resilience as well compared to older staff. So that sort of gives you a little bit of the context about what's going on in your organisations around your people. And what is the approach that we would recommend taking to trying to solve some of this? So if you're trying to genuinely target well-being and health to bring down costs around absence and churn, how should you do it? So our approach is to really look at your organisation at a macro level in 3 different groups and try and target those 3 groups quite differently. Engaging with leadership is really important. That gives anything that you're doing authenticity. The moment that we're sort of, as an organisation, handed down into head of wellbeing or head of benefits, we know that we're onto a really tough ride in getting colleagues engaged. You do need to engage senior leadership. You need senior sponsorship for colleagues to feel this is taking an importance. Line managers, particularly junior line managers, are super important in terms of any wellbeing strategy twofold. One, it creates a level of advocates within your organisation who are easily identifiable and accessible for colleagues. And secondly, actually, that first-time line management cohort are the most expensive in terms of churn within organisations, so they churn at a higher rate than other levels of line management within your organisation, so they cost you more, and they are the most likely to be stressed, and I'll come on to that a little bit more. And then finally, a separate set of messaging for colleagues, and again, I'll come on to that in a moment. So if you take those 3 cohorts, what we tend to do is sort of blend our approach to how we communicate and the strategy around how we engage with them. And our approach really is, and I'll go into these in a little bit more detail, our approach really is 4-fold. The first is to really focus on engagement. It's to get people actually using the tools that you have. Traditionally, traditional tools and services around wellbeing, traditional EAPs tend to have an engagement rate of about 3 to 4% of your population, where actually we know that the cohort that need help most, that's sort of if you think about rating your workforce in a red, amber, green, so where red are those people that are already absent, already unwell, and need immediate help. Green are those that are well. It's that amber grouping that can make up to around 16 to 20% of your workforce that we really need to get in front of. So also engagement for engagement's sake is rather pointless as well. We want to try and pick off those people that are close to being ill, might be showing signs of presenteeism already, that are on the verge of costing your organisations money, or already causing issues by being off work. The second approach is very much to reduce the burden around line management. I'll come on to that in a moment. Third is that we're really, as an industry, as UK PLC, must find a way of addressing the rising levels of customer abuse, because it is putting people off working for us. It's also, among our workforce, causing rising levels of anxiety. 44% of all of frontline workers now, at some point, are questioning whether to come into work as a result of abuse and verbal assault that they are receiving on a day-to-day basis. And then fourthly, we really recommend that you look at data and try and link health outcomes back to reducing costs around churn and absenteeism, and see this as something strategic, to measure it and see it as something strategic. So to go into those in a little bit more detail, driving engagement, as I've said, is really important, and it's engaging the people that need the help the most. So it's not about your healthy population. They're likely to engage in health tools and seek and support themselves already. And also you've got about 2 or 3% of your population that are probably in immediate crisis, that are will be getting access and looking for access around counselling and therapy in particularly. It's that 16 to 20% of your workforce that I say that may be showing signs, that amber cohort that we're interested in getting. And creating initiatives that don't see them as a homogenous all, but instead try and pick people off and pick cohorts off with appropriate solutions is really important. So having multiple communication strategies, understanding that people like to engage with health products in different ways, and having multiple channels for people to access the respective health service is really important. And so obviously all of this needs to be measured, so you're getting better and better at communicating with people. Just as importantly as understanding who is accessing stuff is really understanding the cohorts that are not receiving the messaging and are not accessing services, creating bespoke communication plans to go after that group. If there's one silver bullet I can suggest to immediately lean into issues of presenteeism, absence and churn around mental health, it is taking that cohort of junior line managers and making sure that they are trained in the soft skills to deal with the issues of their people. Retail, I'm sure of all of your businesses as well, and customer services. The DNA of the people have two really unique but valuable characteristics, I think. The first is that they tend to be people. The second part of their DNA is that they tend to be problem solvers as well. And that's an amazing thing to be part of, but it creates a rather unique set of challenges for junior line managers who don't necessarily have the right skills to deal with mental health issues of their team, and that they try and solve their problems for them. And training them up in how to signpost, identify issues, identify problems within their teams, but maintain a level of distance between them and their colleagues so that they don't get dragged into those problems themselves is really, really important, but it's incredibly difficult for people to do. The cohort of junior line managers tend to be very young. They tend to not necessarily have life experiences. And as I said earlier, one of the consequences of colleagues and organisations talking more about mental health is that people are now turning to their line managers and looking for help. And so this is the most stressed cohort within your organisations. They are the most likely to churn as a result of these increased burdens and increased stress. And therefore directing training budget to improve their soft skills about having high quality conversations around mental health, driving performance while still being cognitive of people's need for safe psychological spaces, and protecting themselves from taking on the burden of their teams is the single. If I would say there's one silver bullet, this is it. To tackling customer abuse, as I said, this is probably the single largest factor that we're seeing come through all of the HR departments. As I say, we work with about 205 organisations at the moment. And this is the single largest factor at the moment, I think, conversation point within all of those organisations, is that how do we address rises in customer abuse verbal and physical assault across the populations that we look after. As I said, 90% of all colleagues now have faced abuse at some point in their year. A third are facing that on a daily basis, and it's causing well over 40% at some point to question whether they want to come in to work as a result of those levels of assault and abuse. The really interesting statistic for me out of all of the research that we've run around this is that two colleagues can face exactly the same level of assault, verbal assault, from a customer. The colleague that feels that they are in an organisation where they understand what the policy is post-incident, that they think that that is being taken seriously, that the data is being collected around it, and that there is some sort of organisational response to that incident, is only 16% likely to churn as a result of the abuse. If that colleague is in an organisation where they don't think those support networks are around them, they are 60% likely to churn. So given that the average cost of a churned employer is about £30,000, the delta between those two things in terms of the cost to our industry is absolutely enormous. So having a very clear response to assault and verbal is incredibly important, both morally but also financially. Our approach really is threefold. The first is to campaign publicly around reminding consumers, customers of the need for kindness, that your colleagues that are on the end of the lines are there to help, that they are there to serve, and ultimately kindness really matters. So we have an annual campaign that runs at the moment in October called Respect Retail, to try and get customers to understand the need for kindness. The second then is to train colleagues in the tools, not just to de-escalate situations, but actually for them and their teams as well, is how to deal with the aftermath of verbal and physical assault. And then actually also then to make sure you've got the right pathways in place as well. So again, one size doesn't fit all here. A level of abuse to one colleague can mean many different things depending on the individual. Some of them may just require one phone call to someone to get over the anxiety. Some might need to go into short-term counselling. Some might need CBT. Some might need reminding through sort of on-demand training of how to deal with the aftermath of it. So having different tools that are easily accessible, really important as well. The other thing is that this all needs to be wrapped up in a really clear, concise policy. I am really constantly surprised, given the rising levels of assault that we are seeing, how many organisations don't have a policy that everybody understands about what to do post-incident. And then fourth and the last thing really is all about linking this data that you've got to business outcomes. So the sooner that we can get these issues, levels of happiness linked to, what is that doing around absence? What's that doing around productivity? What's that doing around churn? Being able to see that by cohort, understand it by geography, and linking that then to actual cost savings in the organisation, the sooner we'll get issues like this looked at strategically rather than tactically. And it goes back to that old adage that you can't move what you can't measure. So using that data and linking it actually to outcomes, challenging your teams to see inputs around health and well-being clearly linked to financial outcomes, incredibly important. And given the environment, the macroeconomic environment that we are all working in at the moment, where we are burdened with rising costs, we believe this is essential to having a thriving business now. So that's essentially our approach. Drive engagement with tailored content, understand the cohorts of the people that you're working in, make sure that you're training your junior line management in particular, ensure that you've got a clear response around rising levels of verbal and physical assault, and link all of your inputs to outcomes around data and your financial outcomes as well. So I'm just going to leave you with a very short video that I hope explains our approach a little bit better. On behalf of everyone at the Trust and the 600,000 people that we look after every year as well, just a massive thank you again for you for listening, and to Sabio for their ongoing support of our initiatives. If anybody would like to have a chat with us about how we might be able to support you and your people, please do come find me afterwards as well. Thank you.
I've worked in retail my whole career. I have never seen homelessness, stress, anxiety, financial situations. I've never seen so much of it all the time than now.
Life got hard at one point, you know, the deaths in the family, marriage ending, life completely changing. And I really struggled with my mental health. Didn't have the motivation to get out of bed. And then my boss was like, right, you need help. So we went 2 avenues, went Doctors Avenue, went Retail Trust Avenue as well. And then eventually just got a really good counsellor that just took me through the emotional journey.
Retail Trust is the oldest industry-funded charity in the country, 192 years old. You can see our mission and vision written down even back then, which is to create hope, health and happiness for everyone in the sector.
We use Retail Trust to support all of our colleagues across all of our divisions.
They cover so many different topics. It's financial, it is also legal, mental health.
They're available on the end of a phone 24/7, 365 days a year.
Our services cover about 600,000 colleagues. We have an internal goal called our Path to Million, which is to get our services in front of 1 million colleagues every single year.
One thing we think works really well is that whole face-to-face and personable interaction. We hold things like retail conferences where we get all of our store managers together, and the Retail Trust actually came and had like a stand at that, which was really great because they got to speak to the managers in person.
It really is a constant business solution.
We've built a platform that allows companies not only to understand what's going on within their businesses with regards to actually what are people doing, but actually how they're feeling as well.
Happiness Dashboard is absolutely the next step, because what it does is give you some really detailed data so that you can look and see what is it that our colleagues actually do need. Ultimately, what you're looking for is happier colleagues, having the ability to access services that allow them to feel happier, healthier. My hope is that we can continue to innovate, to keep with the times, keep meeting the needs of our colleagues and people in retail.
They keep you going, and you know, we've been through so many journeys in life together. It's, yeah, I feel like, it's a cliche when you say we're one big family. It feels like that. I spend more time with them, people at work, than I do with anyone else. You know, we live our lives together, we've gone through so much together.